My sister stood in the driveway holding keys to a brand new BMW, a red ribbon tied around the hood like it was Christmas morning. My parents were recording, laughing, calling her their superstar. And me? I was sitting at the kitchen table with a hospital estimate in my lap. $7,340 for a surgery I desperately needed. A surgery they'd already told me they wouldn't help pay for. But somehow, there was money for a luxury car. That's when I realized something that would change everything. I had become invisible in my own family. The truth is, the pain didn't start all at once. It crept in slowly, like something learning to live inside me. At first, it just felt like tightness in my lower abdomen, something I chalked up to stress or too much coffee on an empty stomach. You know how it is. You think it's nothing. You tell yourself you'll walk it off, that it'll pass. But then it started waking me up at night. Dull at first, then sharp, like something inside me was twisting tight and refusing to let go. I still didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I was working 4 days a week at the Lantern Cafe and Books in downtown Charlotte, mostly restocking shelves, barista shifts, some register work. No benefits, no health plan, just enough to cover rent on my half of a basement unit and keep my groceries basic. I tried everything I could afford: ginger tea, heating pads, over-the-counter pain relievers. I even asked Cheryl, one of the older servers, if she had any home remedies. She handed me a bottle of clove oil and said, "Rub it on your belly and pray, honey." But nothing worked. Nothing stuck. I kept going, though, because that's what you do when you're the one who doesn't make trouble. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the helper, the extra set of hands. I babysat my younger sister Sienna through half her childhood while Mom worked second shift at the hospital and Dad ran his landscaping business. Sienna was always the golden girl. Straight A's, spelling bees, flute recitals, summer camps funded by scholarships, and family contributions. I'd be the one behind the camera while Mom called out, "Smile bigger, baby." And she always did. I didn't resent her for it. Not really. It just became clear over time that some people shine naturally in a family, and some people keep the lights on in the background. So when I finally couldn't ignore the pain anymore, I went to the clinic 2 blocks from the bookstore. They did a few quick tests and told me I needed to see someone at Pine Regional Medical Center. I waited another week just to schedule the appointment. My body already knew something was wrong, but my wallet wasn't ready to agree. That appointment was the one where the doctor looked me in the eyes and said, "Lauren, you likely have advanced endometriosis. If we don't address this soon, it could affect your reproductive health, your digestive system, and your overall quality of life. Surgery is the best option." He handed me a thick envelope with my blood work, scan summaries, and the estimate. Out-of-pocket responsibility after insurance denial, $7,340. "It's manageable," he added, trying to soften the weight of it. "But don't sit on this." I nodded, said thank you, walked home slow, holding my coat shut with one hand, and that envelope with the other. That was 3 days before the BMW showed up in our driveway. I kept thinking if I had just told them earlier, maybe it would have changed things, but deep down, I knew better. Still, I waited until after dinner one night. Not a special one, just leftover baked ziti and store-brand salad mix. The kind of meal where nobody really talks, just chews with the TV murmuring in the background. I let them finish, washed a few dishes, dried my hands on a dish towel I'd seen in our kitchen since high school. Then I said it. "Can I talk to you both for a second?" I remember how slowly Mom turned her head, like I'd interrupted a meeting instead of a rerun of NCIS. Dad muted the TV but didn't look at me, just stared ahead like whatever I had to say was going to be complicated. "It's about something medical," I began. "I saw a doctor at Pine Regional. They're thinking it's endometriosis. Maybe advanced." He said surgery would be the best course of action. Silence. I slid the folded paper onto the table. "The estimate's here. I've been in a lot of pain." Mom glanced at the paper but didn't touch it. "Didn't you always have stomach issues?" she asked, like I'd brought up some old ankle injury from 5th grade. "This isn't the same," I said quietly. "It's gotten worse." Dad let out this long, tired exhale. Lauren, we're not saying we don't care. But things are tight right now. Interest rates, inflation, everything. You know how it is. I'm not asking for all of it, I said quickly. I just can't do the whole thing alone. Mom leaned forward, elbows on the table. Have you looked into medical loans? Or GoFundMe? People your age do that all the time now. You're not a child anymore, Lauren. That landed harder than I expected. Not because she was wrong, but because there wasn't even a flicker of concern in her voice. Just inconvenience. Just a problem to outsource. I nodded. Said okay. Picked up the paper and quietly walked back down the hall. Behind me, I heard the click of the remote as Dad turned the volume back up. That was it. No door slam, no big argument. Just nothing. The car came the next weekend. I heard the beep of a flatbed truck out front just after 11 in the morning. A dealership hauler backing into the driveway like it belonged there. I was in the kitchen rinsing out my coffee mug when I heard it. Lauren, Mom called from the porch. Come see what your sister got. She said it like it was a surprise, but everything about it felt planned. The ribbon, the timing, the phone already in Dad's hand, set to record. I stepped outside but didn't go far, just hovered by the screen door. Sienna stood next to a white BMW 3 Series, hands to her face, eyes wide like she couldn't believe it. Is this real? She laughed. Is this seriously mine? You earned it, sweetheart, Dad said, zooming in with his phone. Graduating with honors, landing that marketing internship. This is just the beginning. Mom was already posing with her, angling her body for the best shot. Smile with the keys, she chirped. Let's get one for Facebook. Oh, and a boomerang. Sienna tossed her hair and spun the key fob in her fingers like she'd done it 100 times. I stood there in the shadow of the doorframe, one hand still damp from the sink. Nobody looked my way. Not once. I didn't want the car. I didn't even want the attention. I just wanted to be seen, to have one moment, just one, where someone turned to me and said, Hey, how are you doing? But they were laughing now, joking about road trips and insurance. You're not speeding, right? Dad teased. And I realized I could have vanished right then, walked straight down the sidewalk and kept going, and nobody would have noticed until it was time to post the group photo. That's when I turned back into the house, closed the door gently behind me, and stared at the corner of the refrigerator. There was a magnet holding an old picture, a beach vacation from years ago, Sienna in the middle, Dad's arms around her, Mom holding the camera. I was cropped at the edge, half a smile, half a shoulder, and somehow, even then, they'd already learned how to frame a memory without me. After that Saturday, I stopped trying to be part of the noise. I adjusted my work schedule, took more early shifts, closed a few evenings, said yes when the manager asked who could cover Sundays. Nobody at home noticed. Sometimes I'd come in after 9 at night, shoes soaked from the rain, apron folded in my backpack. The house would be dark except for the blue flicker of the TV through the living room curtain. Other times, I'd already be gone by the time anyone woke up. I started eating at work, oatmeal packets during the lull between breakfast rush and the book club regulars. Whatever was left in the pastry case by 3, I'd wrap in napkins and eat standing up in the back hallway. My room became more of a storage unit than a place to rest. I stopped bringing laundry to the main basket, started doing it late at night in the garage sink. I didn't want questions, didn't want pity. The pain hadn't gone away. If anything, it had changed shape, becoming quieter but sharper, like my body had learned to suffer more politely. One morning, while wiping tables near the front window, a customer I barely knew looked at me and said, "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I blinked, not because of what she said, but because she'd said anything at all. "I'm fine," I whispered. But she didn't buy it. She just gave me that look. One I hadn't seen in weeks. Concern. That night, I went home and opened the shared family calendar app we'd used for years. Vacations, appointments, birthdays. I deleted myself from it, one line at a time. Then I went to the living room photo wall. I wasn't in many of them to begin with, but there was one from a backyard graduation party 3 years ago. Sienna with her cap tilted. Mom holding flowers, Dad with barbecue tongs, me in the back holding the guest list. I didn't take it down. I just turned it slightly on the nail, so it tilted away from the light. I didn't slam doors, I didn't say goodbye. But the next day, when Sienna came home with takeout and asked, "Where's Lauren?" Mom didn't even pause. She just said, "Probably at work." And that was enough for everyone. But what happens when no one notices you stopped coming back? It started with a phone call, not to me, to my parents, from Grandpa Joe. He rarely called them, preferred texts or the occasional group email with too many ellipses and subject lines in all caps. But this time, it was different. I heard about it secondhand through Aunt Mary Ann, who worked with him on the board of his housing trust fund. Grandpa had received a letter from the university's financial office. Apparently, Sienna had taken out a student loan under the family's name, co-signed without permission, to lease her uptown apartment near campus. The internship she'd been bragging about on Instagram? Unpaid. The side job at the boutique? Let go after 2 weeks for missing shifts. And the car? Not paid in full. Not even close. The dealership had sent a final payment notice to Dad's business address. $18,000 still owed, with interest accruing daily. Grandpa had seen enough. He called, calmly, firmly, and told them to sit down. "Do you know where Lauren is?" he asked. Silence on their end. "Do you know what she's going through?" More silence. "Because she called me," he lied, his voice steady, deliberate. "And I know." That last line cracked something. They didn't call me right away, but they stopped posting. Sienna's TikToks disappeared. Mom archived all the graduation photos. The ribboned car pic? Gone. I watched from a distance. Quiet. Still. Like someone watching strangers rearrange a room they forgot you once lived in. 2 weeks later, Dad sent a group text to the extended family. "If anyone hears from Lauren, please ask her to call home." I didn't respond, but I read it. That same night, I got a letter. Not an email. A printed envelope, hand addressed in Grandpa's shaky cursive. Inside was a check, made out to me, and a sticky note in his handwriting. "For whatever you need, you were never invisible to me." That was the first time I cried. Really cried. Not from pain, but because someone, just one person, had remembered that I was more than background noise. A few days later, Mom tried calling. Then Dad. I didn't answer. They weren't calling to say sorry. They were calling because things were breaking, and they needed someone who wouldn't drop the pieces. But I wasn't coming back. I'd been the quiet one for so long. They forgot that quiet doesn't mean weak. They forgot that sometimes the person sitting at the edge of the photo is the one who remembers where the light actually came from. And now they were sitting at a table with one empty chair and finally noticing the seat that had always been holding everything together. They didn't stop trying. Texts, missed calls, a voicemail from Mom that started with, "I don't even know what you're so upset about," and ended with, "Family is still family, Lauren." That one stayed unopened. I didn't block them. I just didn't answer. Grandpa followed up once, just to check how I was feeling after the procedure. I told him the truth. Recovery was slow, but I was healing. "Good," he said. "But don't go back there unless you want to." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The surgery happened in early October. Grandpa's check covered it entirely. The hospital was cold and sterile, but the nurses were kind. One of them, an older woman named Diane, held my hand before they put me under. "You're gonna be just fine, honey," she said, and for the first time in months, I believed it. Recovery took 3 weeks. I stayed in my basement apartment living off soup and crackers, binge-watching old sitcoms. Cheryl from the cafe dropped off meals twice. A coworker I barely knew sent flowers. Strangers cared more than my own family ever had. By the time November rolled around, I was back on my feet, still sore, still healing, but no longer drowning. I didn't reach out to my parents, didn't send updates, didn't explain. I just lived. And for once, that felt like enough. One afternoon in mid-November, I ran into Dad at the pharmacy. He saw me before I saw him. paused in the aisle, holding a bottle of cold medicine. "Lynn," he said softly, like saying my name alone might pull me back. I looked at him, really looked. He seemed smaller, like the world had pushed inward. "I didn't know you were still around," he said. I smiled, just a little. "I was never far," I said. He opened his mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to ask, but I cut in gently, my voice calm. "I was there the whole time, Dad. You just didn't look." And with that, I walked past him. No anger, no drama, just a sentence he couldn't argue with, and silence that, for once, wasn't mine to carry. Thanksgiving came 2 weeks later. I didn't go home. Didn't even consider it. Instead, I spent the day with Cheryl and her family, a small gathering in a cramped apartment that smelled like roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. Her grandkids ran around the living room. Her daughter poured wine and told stories about her terrible ex-husband, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. No performance, no cameras, just people who saw me. That evening, my phone buzzed. A group message. From Mom. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. It was a photo. The dining room table at my parents' house, the big oak one we'd eaten at my entire childhood. Turkey in the center, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, Grandpa Joe at the head of the table, smiling softly. Aunt Marianne on one side, Sienna on the other, looking smaller than usual. Dad and Mom flanking the ends. But right where I used to sit, between Sienna and the window, there was an empty chair. No one sat in it. No plate, no napkin, no glass of water, just space. The caption read, "Thankful for family, missing one of ours." I stared at that photo for a long time, not with sadness, not with anger, just with clarity. They finally saw it. The absence, the gap I'd left behind, the role I'd played for so long that they didn't even realize it was a role until I stopped performing. I didn't reply to the message, but I saved the picture, printed it out a few days later at the library, folded it once, and slipped it into the back pocket of an old journal I'd almost thrown out last year. Not because I needed it, but because someday, if I ever forget how quiet the eraser felt, I'll have proof that they finally saw it too. That chair was never just empty. It was a memory they could no longer crop out. Weeks passed. The holidays came and went. I worked through Christmas, picked up extra shifts on New Year's Eve, started saving money. Real money. The kind that wasn't eaten up by medical bills or late fees. In February, I moved out of the basement unit. Found a small one-bedroom across town with a window that faced east. Morning light poured in every day. I bought a coffee maker, a second-hand couch, a lamp that didn't flicker. I built a life. Quietly. Carefully. Without asking permission. Grandpa sent me a card on my birthday. Inside, he wrote, "Proud of you, Lori girl. Always have been." I framed it. Mom and Dad tried reaching out a few more times over the months. Texts on holidays, a card at Easter. I didn't respond to most of them, but I didn't block them either. Because the truth is, I didn't need them to apologize anymore. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them to know that I was fine, that I had survived, that the girl they overlooked had learned to see herself, and that was more than enough. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who only see you when you're gone, and let them sit with that empty chair. Let them wonder. Let them remember. Because you were always there. They just didn't look. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, if you've ever been the chair no one saved, drop a comment below. Your story matters. You are not alone, and if this resonated with you, hit subscribe, because here, you're always seen.
They called me the failure child. Not outright. Never loud enough to leave proof. But in whispers. In glances. In what they didn't say. My sister? The golden one. Military star. Dad's favorite. Mom's mirror. And me? I fixed cars. Took night classes. Started a business they never asked about. No medals. No applause. Just grease under my nails and peace in my solitude. Until the day of her promotion ceremony. I went because I was invited by mistake. My sister assumed I wouldn't show. Or maybe she wanted the satisfaction of watching me sit quietly in the back, beneath their polished uniforms and smug champagne. The room was stiff with ego. Rows of press collars, badges shining like they'd never been touched by dirt. My father ignored me. My mother offered a plastic smile, before leaning to someone and whispering. He always struggled, never quite rose to the occasion. I sat, silent, not small, just done. The ceremony started. They introduced ranks, called out names, and my sister beamed. Then he walked in, her base commander. Tall, decorated, gravitas like thunder in dress blues. He scanned the room, paused. Then his eyes landed on me. Locked. Unmoving. He walked over, each step louder than the last, and said, "Sir, may I get a photo with you?" The room stopped breathing. Even the air froze. My father blinked. My sister's hand dropped mid-salute. Mom's glass trembled. "I don't mean to cause a scene," the commander said, "but I read your article in Veteran Leadership Weekly. Your story changed how I lead my men." He turned to the photographer. "Get this man in frame. This is what real resilience looks like." The click of the camera shutter was louder than applause. And my family? They just stood there, mouths half open, realizing too late the failure child was the man they all wanted to be. My name is James Walker, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is just being seen by someone who truly knows your worth. The photo made it to the base website. Front page. My name's spelled right. No middle initial. No asterisk. Just. Local veteran and entrepreneur inspires new leadership model. I didn't post it. Didn't gloat. Didn't tag a soul. But my phone started buzzing like it owed someone money. First came the text. From my dad. "Didn't know you were involved with base leadership. Proud of you, son." From my mom. "Saw your name online. Looks like things are going well." And finally, from my sister. That was unexpected. "Can we talk?" Talk. She hadn't talked to me in years. Only sent invites out of obligation. Introduced me at functions as, "Oh, this is just my older brother. He does stuff with cars." They never asked about the program I built. The one that trained ex-Marines to become certified mechanics, giving them tools, work, and most importantly, purpose. They didn't know I'd spoken at the Pentagon last spring. Didn't know I'd been nominated for a national award. Didn't know because they never cared to ask. Until someone with more medals than them shook my hand and said, "You taught me what leadership really is." That night, I went home, sat on the worn couch in my quiet shop office, and looked at the photo. Me in a plain button-down. Him in full uniform. But the respect? Undeniable. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small in my family's shadow. I realized they had been standing in mine. Because the measure of a man isn't who claps for him. It's what echoes in the silence. After they stop. And suddenly, the silence from them? It didn't sting anymore. It just proved what I always knew. I never needed their validation to be somebody. But now that the world saw me, they were the ones desperate to pull me back in. They wanted a reunion? They'd get one. But not on their terms. Not in their language. And not with their rules. I wasn't their shame anymore. I was the reminder that they misjudged the one man who never stopped showing up, even when they erased him from every photo. 2 days later, my sister called. I didn't pick up. She tried again. Then texted. "We're throwing a small dinner to celebrate my promotion. It would mean a lot if you came. Everyone's asking about you now." Not "I'm sorry." Not "I was wrong." Just, "They're asking about you now." Now. Not back when she laughed at my busted hands. Not when she told our cousins I dropped out of everything. Not when she joked. "James? Oh, he fixes oil leaks and ego leaks. Guess one paid off." But now. That her commander wanted a photo. Now. That I had a name people whispered with respect. I stared at the message. Then replied. "Sure." I'll come. Because I wanted to see it. The moment truth stood next to arrogance.
And watched it shrink.
I arrived late. On purpose. The dinner was in a private room at a downtown hotel. Dim chandeliers. Polished silver. Everything fake. Except for the way my dad nearly dropped his wine glass. When I walked in, suddenly, I was someone again. Suddenly, they were proud. There he is, my father said too loud. The man of the hour. Mom kissed my cheek like we hadn't gone silent for a year. Even my sister smiled, stiff and glossy. Glad you could make it, James. I took a seat. Didn't say much. Just listened. Then the commander walked in. The room stood.
And he made a beeline.
Not to my sister.
To me.
James, he said, I told HQ about your training center. We'd love to send some of our guys through it post-discharge. You're building something real. Every eye turned. Every plate paused mid-bite. Even my sister blinked too fast. And then, with no effort, he dropped the line that shattered them. You should have told me your brother was the James Walker. Man's practically a legend. Silence. I looked at my sister. She couldn't hide it. The storm behind her teeth. The realization that the shadow she tried to bury had grown roots,
Had bloomed. And now,
he was standing at her table. I raised my glass. Not out of pettiness. Out of peace. To unexpected reunions, I said. And the truth. It always arrives. Even if it's late. After that night, the calls didn't stop. Suddenly, I was important. Not because they remembered my sacrifices, but because others had. My dad invited me to golf. He hates golf. Mom asked if I'd come over for Sunday dinner, just like old times. There were no old times. Only obligations I used to mistake for love. And my sister? She texted me a photo of us as kids, with a single line. We were close once. Let's try again. I stared at it. The irony. All my life, I sat at the table they built. Quiet, compliant, invisible. Pretending it was home. Now suddenly I was welcome. Now they wanted to rewrite the past. Because the present didn't serve their pride anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to my shop the next morning. And opened early. I had 4 vets waiting. One just out of rehab. One who hadn't held a wrench in 10 years. One who showed up because I paid for his bus ride across state lines. And one kid who just needed someone to tell him he wasn't broken. We talked.
worked.
Laughed like we'd known each other for years. No uniforms. No ranks. Just men building something real. With their hands and their pain. At lunch, I checked my phone. My sister had posted a photo. Her with the commander. Me tagged. The caption? Proud of my big brother. My silent rock. Always leading in his own way. Silent rock? She had buried me alive for years. Now that I was trending in their world, she wanted to hold the thread. Like, she'd sew me into her story. I untagged myself. No announcement. Just a quiet boundary. Because I'm not your plot twist. Not your redemption arc. Not the failure child you get to reframe. Now that I survived your silence. That day, I etched a new sign outside my shop. Walker and Sons. Built from grit, not permission. And I meant it. I no longer needed a seat at their table. Because I'd built my own. Stronger. Wider. One where no one had to shrink to stay. I got a call from my cousin Nate that weekend. He never calls. Always kept out of the mess. But his voice was tight, cautious. James, just wanted to give you a heads up. Your parents are throwing a party next month. Word is, you're the guest of honor. I blinked. I didn't agree to that. He sighed. I figured. But they're telling people you're flying in. That you'll give a speech. That the family's close again. Close? They hadn't even called when I was in the hospital 6 years ago. After a service injury nearly took my leg.
Didn't visit.
Didn't text. Just posted praying hands under an article and moved on. Now, they wanted me to play the prodigal son. Because it looked good in a room full of donors. Because I was finally a story worth attaching to.
I didn't get mad.
Not anymore. That part of me? Long buried. I just booked a speaking gig the same night, at a high school 200 miles away, talking to teens who'd aged out of foster care. People who actually listened, who didn't care what medals I wore, just that I showed up and didn't leave. The night of their party, my sister sent a selfie from the ballroom. "Everyone's asking about you. You sure you're not coming?" I replied, "Hope it goes well. I've got people who actually need me tonight." No emoji.
No stuff.
Just that. Later, I saw a post on her story. The room, dimly lit. My dad giving a toast. Captioned, "Family is everything." And that's when I knew they were mourning something they never truly valued.
Me.
Not the version of me they created in their heads. Not the wounded mechanic. Or the quiet disappointment.
Me.
The one they didn't believe in.
Didn't invest in.
Didn't invite until someone else validated him. And now that I wouldn't show up for their narrative, they had to fill the space with fake smiles and hollow words. But the truth? It echoed louder without me there. Because absence isn't silence. It's a mirror. And that night, they were finally forced to look in it. 2 weeks passed. Then came the article. Not from me. From the base's media division. A full spread on veteran-led rehabilitation centers. The headline? From Discharge to Destiny. How James Walker is rewriting the future for veterans. Photos.
Quotes.
Stories from men I trained, who now had their own shops. It hit national syndication by morning. News anchors said my name. Commenters called me the kind of man this country forgets, then worships too late. And suddenly, I wasn't just a brother. I was a movement. I didn't even know until my inbox flooded. Partnership offers. Speaking engagements. A senator's aide asking if I'd attend a bill signing. I said yes to the last one. Because if I could change even one policy that stopped treating broken soldiers like scrap, I'd do it 100 times. But what really landed was the message from my mom.
Short.
And painfully familiar. "Why didn't you tell us this was happening? We could have supported you. You're making us look like strangers." I stared at it. And then I laughed. A real, full laugh. The kind that starts in your gut. And doesn't ask permission. Because strangers? They were kinder than she ever was. Strangers didn't call me embarrassing behind closed doors. Didn't say, "Not everyone can be like your sister, James." I wrote back, "You never supported what you couldn't control. I built this without you. So don't act like you held the hammer." No reply. Later, I got a screenshot from a mutual friend. My sister had posted again. This time with a side-by-side photo of us. Captioned, "Proud to be related to someone who's finally using his potential." Finally. Like my worth had been on layaway. Like her praise was the final stamp of approval. I messaged her once. "You don't get to rewrite my story now that it's profitable." Then I blocked her. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. Because when the story is no longer theirs to spin, they panic. They scramble. They cling to the pieces they once threw away. But I'm not a piece anymore. I'm the whole damn blueprint. And they're not invited to this build. The senator shook my hand. Firm grip. Direct eye contact. "We need more men like you, Mr. Walker." The cameras clicked. The press smiled. But all I could think about was how not one of my family members had even texted congratulations. They'd gone quiet. But not because they were proud in silence. Because they weren't part of the photo this time. And that meant they couldn't use it. At dinner after the event, I sat across from a young vet, with burns down his arm and tears in his throat. "They said I wasn't leadership material," he told me. "But you taught me I was worth rebuilding." I nodded. Not just for him. For myself. Because every time I poured into these men, I reclaimed a little piece of the boy they ignored.
Meanwhile,
my parents were scrambling. They'd been trying to get in touch with the article's editor, asking if they could submit a family piece to show where I came from.
as if they built me.
As if proximity meant pride. But the editor forwarded me the request. And I replied myself. Respectfully, decline. My story speaks loudest without their commentary. A week later, my aunt called. Said my mom wasn't eating. that my dad had been sulking. They just want to see you again. They're hurting James. I took a breath, then asked, did they ever feel hurt when they left me out of every celebration? When they called me a disappointment behind closed doors? When they built my sister's image with bricks from my silence? She didn't answer, just sighed. Maybe they didn't know better. But I do. And knowing better means doing better, even if it means walking alone. Especially when walking alone is what finally sets you free. I closed the call, sat at my desk, and opened the latest blueprint for the new training center I was building in Phoenix, fully funded, by my own hands, in my own name. No one could erase me now. No one could claim my roots. After chopping down the tree for years, they wanted me to be a footnote. Instead, I became the headline. It was raining the day I got the call. Not from family, not from media, from a soldier, one of the first I ever trained, now head of his own garage. He said, "You've got to come down, James. The plaque's going up today." I almost didn't go, but something pulled me. Not ego, not nostalgia, just closure. The garage was full. Veterans from 5 different states.
Wives. Kids.
Men with scars you could see, and some you couldn't. On the far wall, a polished plaque, bolted into steel. The James Walker Training Hall, for those told they'd never matter. I couldn't speak for a second, because that line was everything I'd ever needed to hear. And no one in my family ever said it. So I said it to every man who came through that door. We cut the ribbon. The cheers were real. The tears even more so. Later that night, I sat in the quiet of my truck. No cameras, no family, just the sound of rain, tapping out a rhythm that felt like peace. Then came the final message. My dad. Your mother and I saw the article in the Times. You've done well, maybe too well. Either way, you've proven your point. Proven my point? Like my entire life was a debate. I'd finally won by accident.
I didn't reply.
Just blocked the number. For good. Because this wasn't about proving anything. It was about surviving everything. And still choosing to build. I looked at my hands, the same hands they once said were meant for manual labor. They were right, but they forgot. Hands that build also hold. Hands that hold also heal. And mine? They did all 3. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the foundation. The storm that didn't just pass, but rebuilt the town after. Let them tell stories. Let them twist the timeline. I'm not theirs to edit anymore. I'm the man who made peace louder than applause. Who walked away and kept walking. Until the only thing behind him was silence that no longer hurt. And ahead, a line of men who now believe in themselves. Because I once stood alone. And didn't fold. This was never revenge. This was resurrection. At Easter dinner, my mother raised her glass like she was royalty. Give me back the money I wasted raising you. The table chuckled.
Except me.
I pulled out my phone, transferred her $1 with a single click. Now give me back the 10 years I spent paying your bills. Silence. Then my sister leaned back with a smirk. Don't bring your family again. They're low class. Beneath me. I looked at her. Perfect makeup. Gucci earrings. Living in the condo I bought, driving the car I leased. I took a long sip of wine. Held her gaze. Here's to my sister, who now has a rich boyfriend, and a lifestyle I bankrolled. Then I stood up. By the way, I'm done paying for your luxuries. They thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. That night I went home, logged into every joint account, and one by one, froze the cards, revoked their access, canceled the auto payments, blocked every number. Utilities?
Shut down.
Condo maintenance? Canceled. Mom's online shopping addiction? Declined. Sister's gym membership, facial packages, hair appointments? All linked to my card until 11:42 p.m. that night. By morning, my phone was a war zone. 32 missed calls. Voicemails from shrieking voices that had once dismissed me as a loner with too much pride. They weren't angry because they missed me. They were angry because the funding faucet was gone. And the most delicious part? Not one of them knew what I'd been working on. Behind the scenes, the grant I secured, the nonprofit I launched, the investment that hit 6 figures last week. They thought I was the side character in their golden girl narrative, the one who'd never settle down, who was good with money but bad with people. But I was never the failure. I was their silent foundation. And now that foundation had finally crumbled, on purpose. Let's just say, Easter was the last meal they ever ate on my dime. By Monday, chaos erupted. Mom's cable stopped working mid-morning talk show. She called the provider, only to be told the auto-pay failed. Sister showed up at her favorite spa. Platinum membership? Declined. She tried to swipe again, harder this time, like pressure would force approval. Didn't work. The receptionist smiled politely. Maybe try another card? She stormed out. I was at the bank when the first joint account flagged. The manager looked at me and said, "You've been supporting 3 additional cardholders for over 9 years. That's rare." I smiled. Not anymore. By evening, my inbox was full of apologies dressed as guilt trips. Mom texted, "I didn't mean what I said. It was just a joke. Can we talk?" My sister wrote, "You're overreacting. Family doesn't pull the plug over words." Words? They weren't just words. They were years of public humiliation, of being mocked at holidays, of them rolling their eyes every time I mentioned my career, calling it just remote work, while I quietly built a portfolio that could buy their entire neighborhood. And now, they had to feel the silence I'd lived in for years. No more birthday checks. No more paid getaways. No more, "Can you just cover this one thing?" I didn't explain. I didn't engage. I simply posted one thing on my story. If they only value you for what you give, stop giving. Watch how quickly love turns to rage. The likes rolled in, even from a few extended cousins, who had seen it all over the years and stayed quiet. I started getting invitations, not from family, but from people who saw my value without a receipt attached. I was free, and they were scrambling. My sister's boyfriend? He moved out 2 days later, when he realized she couldn't afford the condo alone. Mom had to sell her emergency luxury watch to pay the electric bill. They thought cutting me off emotionally would break me. But removing my wallet? That broke them. And I didn't do it out of vengeance. I did it because I finally realized you can't heal in the house that keeps wounding you, especially when you're the one paying its mortgage. By the weekend, my aunt messaged me. Not the favorite aunt. The one who always sat silent at family dinners, eyes down while they mocked me, but never stopped them. "Your mom's been crying every day. She says she's ready to apologize." I didn't answer, because ready didn't mean changed. It meant desperate. I know the difference now. Monday morning, a soft knock on my office door. A delivery. Inside, a handwritten note on cheap stationery, with perfume-smudged corners. "We didn't realize how much we leaned on you. We just thought you were strong enough to handle it."
Not.
"We're sorry. Just. We thought you could take it." As if my silence meant I was built for disrespect. As if my kindness was some bottomless credit line. They never saw the toll. The nights I skipped things for myself, to pay for their whims. The times I said no to therapy, because I had to cover someone's emergency, which always turned out to be a vacation, or a new phone, or concert tickets.
But now?
The pipeline had run dry, and their comfort was cracking. That same day, I got a call from my sister's ex, the rich boyfriend. "Hey, I don't mean to be weird, but you got out of that mess fast. She told me you were just a lonely guy with money, but after what I've seen, you were the only one holding them up." I let him talk. I didn't need to add anything. The truth was taking care of itself now. Meanwhile, they were trying to crowdsource sympathy. On Facebook, Mom posted a photo of us from 10 years ago. Caption: "No family is perfect, but love forgives all." The comments were a war zone. Cousins called her out. Old friends shared screenshots from that Easter dinner. One even commented, "Didn't he pay your bills for a decade while you insulted him?" They started deleting comments fast. but not fast enough. I sat back, sipped my tea, and smiled, because the one thing they never saw coming was that I didn't need revenge. I just needed to stop playing my part in their pretty little lie. And once I did, it all fell apart on its own. I heard nothing for days. Not a text. Not a passive-aggressive post. Not even a new guilt trap disguised as an apology. Silence. And it was glorious. Then, Thursday morning, my doorbell rang. There she was. My mother, standing on the porch in a stiff coat, clutching a sad little bag of pastries, like they could make 10 years of financial abuse taste sweet. I thought maybe we could talk? I didn't move, didn't invite her in, just leaned against the doorframe. About what? I asked. She blinked, clearly not used to resistance.
About this.
I know things were said, but we're family. Family. That word again. Thrown around like a shield when they're cornered. A leash they tighten whenever you try to walk away. You said I was a waste, I reminded her. At Easter dinner. In front of everyone. Then laughed while your daughter called my daughter low class. She looked down. It was a joke. That word. That pathetic, gaslighting word. No, I said calmly. It was a mirror. And for the first time, I let you see yourselves in it. She started crying then. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't heartless. I was just done. She handed me a folded note. Inside, a check for $1,000. It's what you sent me that night, she said. I want to give it back. I don't want your money. I want my son. I smiled. For once, not bitter. Not wounded. Just clear. You never wanted me, Mom. You wanted the version of me that paid your way, stayed quiet when you mocked me, and funded the life you used to pretend was your own. That version's gone. She looked up.
Real tears now.
But I handed the check back. Give it to a charity. Maybe a shelter. Someone who'll appreciate it. Then I shut the door. Not in anger, but with peace. Because walking away wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about protecting me. And as I stood there, in my quiet, peaceful home, self-paid, self-built, self-kept, I realized something. Sometimes the loudest revenge is the silence that follows your absence. Sunday afternoon. I was working in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just peace and soil and silence. When I saw them, 3 cars pulling up. My mother, my sister, 2 aunts. One even brought a casserole. Like forgiveness could be baked. They didn't text, didn't call, just showed up like the past hadn't exploded 4 parts ago. I didn't open the gate, didn't move from the steps. They stood outside like lost tourists, in a town they used to own. My sister called out first. We just want to talk. We didn't mean for things to go so far. Far? I nearly laughed. They pushed me off emotional cliffs for years. Called it love. Called it toughness. But when I finally stopped falling, they panicked. My mother held the casserole like it was a peace treaty. It's your favorite. Mushroom chicken. I hadn't eaten meat in 3 years. They never noticed. We're trying, she added. Can't you see that?
Yes.
I could. I could see the cracks in their confidence. The fear in their eyes now that their ATM had grown a spine. Now that the daughter, who always had too many opinions, had cut the cord they thought was unbreakable. I walked closer, not to embrace them, but so they could hear me clearly. Let me ask you something, I said. If I never paid your bills, if I never bailed you out, would you even be here today? They didn't answer. I kept going. You didn't love me. You loved what I did for you. And now that you can't access it, you're here, calling it family. My sister teared up. We can do better. I shook my head. You had a decade to do better. I asked for respect, not repayment. But all you gave me was laughter, debt, and silence. I'm not coming back. I opened the gate just long enough to hand them the casserole. You can keep this. Consider it the last thing I'll ever accept from you. Then I turned, walked back into my home, into peace, into a future that didn't need their permission. They stood there for another minute, clutching food they'd never let feed me before. Then they left, and I didn't look back, because the girl who once begged for love was finally loving herself louder. The invitation arrived in a crisp, white envelope. From my cousin Amanda, the only one who never mocked me. She was getting married. "You're not just invited," she wrote. "I want you to speak." I almost said no. Not because I didn't love her, but because I knew who else would be there.
Mom, sister.
Every backstabber in pearls and fake smiles. But Amanda had always been kind. So I went. I wore a navy suit. Sharp. Quietly expensive. The kind you only buy when you no longer need to prove anything. The moment I walked in, heads turned. Conversations paused. I could feel them whispering. And I loved it. My sister looked me up and down. Eyes flicked to my shoes, my watch, my posture. Like she couldn't quite recognize me anymore. My mother? She gave a small, stiff smile. I gave none back. Then came the speech. I stood at the mic. Heart steady, voice clear. Amanda once told me, "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up without conditions." She showed up for me when others didn't. And that's why I'm here. The silence was deafening. No claps yet, just a few gasps from relatives, who finally got the message. I kept going. To the ones who only come around when it's easy, "You're too late." And to the ones who watched me break, and only asked for more, "I built my life back without you." Love isn't a transaction, and respect isn't optional. Then I raised my glass. To chosen family, the ones who never demanded, never shamed, and never made me apologize for not being who they expected. And they clapped.
Loud. Long.
Even the caterers stopped to listen. Afterward, a few relatives came to say sorry. I nodded, forgave, but never forgot. Because closure doesn't mean return. It means release. As I left, Amanda hugged me tight. "You were perfect," she whispered. They needed to hear that. I smiled. So did I. That night, for the first time in years, I slept like a woman who owed no one anything. Not her pain, not her loyalty, not even an explanation. 3 days later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $14,000 and a note in my mother's handwriting. "For everything you've paid over the years. Hope this is a start. Let's rebuild." I stared at it, not because the money impressed me, but because it was the first time she ever acknowledged the debt. But the truth? It wasn't about dollars. Never was. You can't repay someone for 10 years of belittling their success. You can't put a price tag on the silence after your daughter cries, because grandma called us trash. And you definitely can't buy back dignity you never respected to begin with. I didn't cash the check. I framed it, hung in my office, right above my law degree, that they once said was probably fake, because I worked from home. 2 days later, my sister texted me, "Saw your little speech at Amanda's wedding. You're still so dramatic." I didn't respond, so she followed with, "Mom's trying. You could meet her halfway." Halfway? I met them at 100 for a decade, paid every bill, covered every tantrum, swallowed every insult. This was the first time I stayed at 0, and suddenly they were exhausted. The truth is, when you stop financing other people's delusions, you become the villain in their story. Let them write it. Let them sell it. I'm too busy funding my piece. That week, I donated the exact $14,000 to a single mom finishing law school, someone whose family gave up on her too. She cried on the phone. I didn't tell her why I chose her. Just said, "No one who keeps going alone should feel alone." My mother never knew, but that's what made it powerful. I didn't need her to clap. Didn't need her guilt. I already had what they'd never give me. Self-worth that isn't up for negotiation. The final attempt came on my birthday. A large bouquet. Orchids, my favorite. A card attached in tight, slanted cursive. "We miss you. Maybe it's not too late to start over. Love, Mom." No demands. No sarcasm. Just a whisper of what could have been. If they'd chosen love instead of leverage. All those years ago. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. I stood in my kitchen, watching those flowers sit silently on my table. Beautiful. And too late. That night, I went out with real friends. The kind who never made me feel like I had to buy their love in installments. One of them raised a glass and said, "You walked away with nothing but your backbone. And look what you built with it." I smiled, because they saw me. Not for what I gave, not for what I fixed, but for who I'd become. When I stopped needing their permission, I never replied to my mom's card, never called, never walked through that door again. Not out of hate, but because healing sometimes looks like knowing when not to return to the fire, just because the flames look smaller. I still keep the card, though, tucked inside my journal, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. This is what people send when they finally realize you were the glue the whole time. But glue isn't meant to be invisible. And I'll never be invisible again. They had their chance. I gave them a decade, 1,000,000 second chances, and 10,000 silent forgives.
Now,
I give that same energy
to me.
to the girl who made her own name, to the woman who stopped flinching, to the survivor who no longer funds her abusers. In the name of keeping the peace. I didn't get revenge. I got clarity. I got strength. I got out. And in the end, that was all I ever needed.